Have you looked into Agentforce? I have. It's quite fascinating what you can do with Salesforce Agentforce, really. I know many of us feel like there is too much hype, too few real world use case scenarios. That's partially true. Now, I wanted to play with this tool hands on and understand what I can do and what I cannot do. That's how I learn, and that's how I teach. First, I got my AI Associate Certificate, then I got my AI Specialist Certificate. And while doing so, I studied on this topic quite a bit. I completed the Trailhead projects and the modules. I got access to Salesforce Foundations, which allowed me to play with the Agentforce tool. I set up Einstein Service Agent, which allowed the users in my org to communicate with the agent in a conversational format and get transactions done. Without further ado, let me show you how I set up the tool and what I learned in the process. I'm in my enterprise level sandbox, and I'm going to show you how I set up Agentforce in here. So as many of you know, I'm in teaching business, like training business, and I have courses, cohorts, and also students that participate in these cohorts. So I set up this custom data model in my org where I have courses listed. Under each course, I have cohorts listed. These actually start at different times throughout the year. And then I can have contacts who are students sign up for these cohorts, right? So that's the data model I have. So between the cohorts and contacts, I have a junction object linking the two together. So I'm going to set up Agentforce, which will allow me to list all the participants in a particular cohort and add a new participant to that cohort or remove that participant, right? So how would I do that? Let me just show you what I did here. So this is my Salesforce sandbox that has the foundations set up, right? And in Foundations, you get actually access to Agentforce if you set it up. Now I'm going to go to my advanced setup and go to agents. And under agents, there is already one agent set up, which is called Einstein Copilot. As most of you know, Salesforce is moving away from the term Copilot, but you can still see it inside the orgs. I'm sure it's going to be removed in time. Now you go into Einstein Copilot and open the builder. And if you have configured this yourself in a custom way, which I have done here, you are going to have standard and custom topics. Now, standard topics you can add from here. There is an asset library, and this asset library has topics that are geared to getting things done in Salesforce. Typical requests that a user could actually put to Agentforce. Now remember, these standard ones could address your needs, or if you have specific needs, you would probably want to create your own custom topics. Now, the topic is the link that's going to associate the user's request, let's say their free-form entry, to the actions. The reasoning engine is going to look at the user interactions and will decide, based on those interactions, which topic or topics will be relevant for the request. And once the reasoning engine determines the topic, there are actions that are associated with this topic that can be used to get that transaction or request completed. So as you can see, these are the standard actions you can choose from. I chose already a couple. There is a general CRM that's available here. I'm not exactly sure if I need this for this particular use case. There is a single record summary as well that I could use, which again may not be needed. I decided that I'm going to need custom actions to get my requests done. especially initially when you're dealing with external use cases where you allow the users to interact with the agent. You want to make sure you set up custom agents and kind of tighten what the custom actions can execute and they cannot execute, right? You want to give a tight scope to your topic, good instructions, and you want to also do the same with your actions. That way you'll make sure there is no misunderstanding and Agentforce would not go off by itself and complete a transaction that you wouldn't want it to do, right? So this is an internal use case, but it could be external. I mean, depending on the situation, you could expose this to external users as well. So the first thing that I wanted to set up was a topic that's going to give a list of the course participants in my org. Course participants is a topic, and this topic retrieves the course cohort participants for a particular cohort. And the scope is, your job is to use the cohort and get the participants for the course cohort. Never ask the user for ID of records. Do not show the user participant contact cards. What I want this topic to do is, instead of showing a full contact card with all the details of the contact, I want this topic to list the participants with all the relevant information. And that I define here in the instructions. I say, use the cohort record ID to query the course participants. Use the action, query course cohort participants, and input the cohort record ID into cohort ID var to achieve that. And it goes on like that. You can read the details here yourself. So you want to be quite particular, and you want to be quite descriptive in your instructions. What I have found and learned, though, interestingly, like for example here in the instructions, I detail that Agentforce should give me a numbered list of all the participants with their first name, last name, and email. I found that this instruction was ignored initially when testing. Although I had specified, for example, in here that you're not supposed to give full details of the contact in a contact card, I would actually get that kind of a result. My result would show, if I had 3 participants, would show like 3 contact cards with a lot of detail. So that's why I moved that instruction later on here into the scope. I find that this worked a little bit better. So when I said do not show the user participant contact card in the scope, I thought that was respected better than when it was in instructions. So that's actually something I learned in the process. Now here, if you go to course participants again, and this time click on this topic's actions, you are going to see the actions that this topic will use. Remember, your topic does not have any other actions other than the ones listed here. It doesn't have access to the other actions in your org. So it can query records, can query course cohort participants, and you can see that this is actually a flow action, a custom action that I've built. And it can also summarize a record, right? And you can see in your testing which topic and which action or actions will be used. So you could find that some of these are not used at all. I don't think summarize record is being used here, for example. You could remove it if you want. And you don't really want to list too many actions here that you don't need, because it'll give your Agentforce implementation the liberties you may not want Agentforce to enjoy. So here, query records is actually an action that allows, obviously, Agentforce to query any records in your org by providing field value, record ID. And this one is my custom flow action that I'm about to show you. And summarize record actually summarizes, let's see the details here, summarizes a single Salesforce CRM record. So let's go back to our flow action here though. Our flow action here shows up like this. So this is a flow with the label course AFA cohort participant get AL flow. These are auto launch flows. They are going to have inputs and outputs. And you are going to define here in agent instructions how they work. So this action gets a list of all the contacts. And here, what I did was I referred to the input variables and the output variables in my instructions. I wanted to make it very clear. And here, in the definition of the inputs and outputs, you are going to see that there are, again, instructions. The earliest start date for the cohort that the user is querying. This is the record ID for the course record. And the output is provide participant contact information. If no participant can be found, then display sorry, no participant could be found in the system. When you're setting this up, when you build your flow and then you set up a custom Agentforce action in your agent builder, what's going to happen is your custom action is going to take over and paste all the flow description and the comments inside your input and output variables. So that's why it's very important that you fill those out while you're building your flow, right? So that's one thing that's quite important. You can customize them, but they are going to be copied over here. You may as well set them up nicely like on the flow side. The other thing that could save time because you set those up nicely on the other side is that when you decide to change some of the input and output variables, you're not really allowed to refresh your flow here on the side. You can't really add another input variable and then kind of refresh the flow here so that the additional input variable shows up over here. You would have to delete your custom action on this side and then create another one. And while creating that other one, the new input variables will show up. And they will again show up with the descriptions and comments you set up in your flow. So it would actually make sense to kind of maintain them there initially. Even if you think you need to customize while you're setting up your custom action, that still makes sense. Your custom action is going to receive these two things. So these two inputs are required. So we need to tell our flow what course we are dealing with. It's going to receive the ID as input. And then we need to also tell this flow what is the earliest acceptable date for the user for the cohort that the user is looking for, right? You know, the user would say something like, okay, I would like to list all the participants for the course cohort that starts right after 1st of February 2025, right? And then as a response, they would get a collection of records back. And here is another detail, and this becomes even more important if you set this up for an external use case. You don't want your collection record variable to include all the details for the contact. You only want to pass back possibly first name, last name, and email. That's it. You could need a couple other field values, but you should always restrict that in your output. And you also define here which of these are required, right? You could actually make a modular and flexible flow, auto launch flow, that you could use for multiple purposes depending on how you pass in the parameters. Again, for external use cases, you want to be careful with that. You know, you want to probably create like more specialized and narrowly capable actions. All right, so let's go back to the setup here. So we have the course participants that we can get, and these are going to show up in the Agentforce feedback here. So this is my agent builder where I can test how my agent works, right? On the right panel here, I can start typing. The one thing that I learned, which is very important, is when I make changes here on the left side, I'll save those changes. There is not really an activation process while you're testing it in here. Doesn't matter whether your agent is active or deactive. I guess I would probably deactivate as I'm making changes. I can still test my agent while it's not active, but when I make changes here on my topics in custom actions, I want to make sure that I refresh this chat panel on the right side so that the changes are reflected. I lost a couple of hours playing with this and making changes before I kind of figured that out. So that's quite important. Make sure that you refresh your right panel, chat panel, while you make your changes. So let me just feed a request to my agent, see how this works. Do you see a complete flow course cohort starting right after February 1st, 2025. All right. Please provide the course name and the earliest start date. So from my question, Agentforce was not able to exactly identify which part of my request was the course name and which one was the start date. So I'm going to say course name is complete flow course, and the start date can be as early as 0T201 2025. Remember, Agentforce sometimes does a good job identifying these. Sometimes it has to ask follow-up questions, figuring out next steps, working. All right, so it found actually a cohort that's suitable for this request, right? So I can see here in the middle panel what kind of topics and actions were used, right? So based on the first prompt, the find cohort for course topic was used, right? Actually, this other topic was used, which I have not really explained to you. I'm about to explain. And then that actually asked which course and the start date we're talking about here, what actions were used here, query records, and identify record by name. And then once I clarified what the inputs were, again, these actions were used, and this time an output was produced. As you can see, the complete flow course cohort record was found, and the details were passed back in a JSON format. And this is the identify record by name, and this is the query records. And the agent response here is that we have this cohort here. So now I'm going to ask Agentforce to give me a full participant list. Give me the list of participants for this cohort. Now the beauty is Agentforce is quite aware of the context here. It remembers all the conversations we had, and it should easily associate my request with this cohort record. It's thinking now. Sorry, no participant could be found in the system. So now here is a problem that I had before as well. It cannot find the participant. So it does do a query records beta, course participants, query course cohort participants, but it doesn't actually use the custom action here. Maybe it's because the custom action requires a record ID input, right? So let's do this. Give me the participant list for cohort code CFC 11T. All right, now we have all the participants. Dinah Prince is a participant with the email address, Eddie Brock is another one, and Lex Luthor is the third one. So here I have a user in my org whose name is Otto Octavius. I'm going to just put in Otto's name in here and say like, go ahead and sign up, enroll Otto Octavius for this cohort. Success. Otto Octavius has been enrolled in this cohort. How else can I assist you? As you can see here, it didn't identify record by name. It found Otto Octavius record ID. And then it ran the custom action course AFA enroll cohort participant get auto launch flow. And then it received a success message back. So the enrollment has been completed. But how can we test that? Let's list the participants again. List the participants for, and I'm going to on purpose type this differently a little bit, complete flow course starting on 2/17/2025. Now we have 4 people. Otto is already enrolled, and when I ask for the participants, I can actually see Otto's name in here. What if I say remove Otto Octavius from this cohort? Figuring out next steps. Success. Otto Octavius has been removed. Now, as you can see here, the previous step was course AFA enroll cohort participant. That's the one that actually enrolled Otto Octavius. Then I got another list. So course participants topic was invoked. And then I invoked the topic remove course participant, which again called a custom action remove cohort participant, and the success message came back. To verify that, let me just ask for a list again. List the participants for this cohort. Let's see if it's going to take that this time. Does Agentforce know which cohort this is? Yes. Now we drop back to 3. Now, one thing I learned throughout this process while setting this up, we are dealing with junction object records here, right? So I'm creating a junction object record to enroll Otto Octavius into this cohort. Between the cohort record and the contact record, there is going to be a new junction object record. But then when I want to remove this person from this cohort, I need to delete that record, but Agentforce is not able to delete records. It's specifically set up not to delete records. That's why I modified my data model a little bit. If there is a record in there already, a junction record, I can actually mark it inactive. And marked inactive that also means that that person is not enrolled, right? If I want to remove those junction object records later so that they won't show in my list views, related records, I could do that, right? I could still automate that. Or I would have to set up some filters for my list views. So I have not really walked you through the other topics. Let me just do that. The first thing that we actually invoked was not really course participants, was find cohort for course, right? So this topic helps the user find the matching cohort for the course name and the earliest start date provided. So your job is to query the system to find it. And you will receive the course name and the earliest start date input from the user, and then find the matching record. And then it goes through the scenarios a little bit. My instructions also says, which action to run there. And then you provide a few examples of user input that would be associated with this topic, right? To train the system, the AI. Now, initially, I actually set up the course participants flow to identify the course, the cohort, and then return the lists in one shot, right? So I can do that in Flow. So when I say as a user to Agentforce, return me the list of all the participants for complete Flow course starting right after 1st of February, it can do that. But I have found I have to actually be a little bit more modular to factor in the flexibility of the process. So, like if there are multiple cohorts, the user will ask about them, pick one of the cohorts, and then possibly ask the list for that single cohort. So there is no point in returning a list without confirming with the user which cohort they are talking about, right? So that's why in latest iterations, I split the course participants and the find cohort for course topics. Let's look at enroll course participant topic here. So this one says enroll a contact in a course cohort. And then the job is to query the contact whose first name and last name is given to you by the user. If you cannot locate the contact, ask for an email. And the instructions will tell Agentforce which action to use. And here, these instructions over here say first query the course cohort record, then query the contact, and then create or update a cohort contact junction object record by populating the course ID and cohort ID. And here is an example input that the user will provide to get this result. And for remove course participant, similarly, this topic removes the course participant, and your job is to query the course, and then using the first, last name, and email, identify the contact and remove the cohort participant by setting the inactive field value on the record to true. And here are further detailed instructions. I also tell the agent how to respond when there's success and when there's actually a failure, an error coming back from Flow. This is an example request that would come from the user. So let's look at the flows. I have 3 flows that create my custom actions for my agent. Now, one of them is the cohort participant list flow, right? So initially, like I said, I set this one up to work also when a course name is provided and an earliest start date. So it would actually identify the cohort, the nearest cohort based on that, and would return a list. But then I also added the possibility of the agent passing directly the cohort ID into this flow. So that's why Initially, it's checking whether the cohort ID is provided. If the cohort ID is provided, it's going to skip all the parts where it's trying to find which cohort we're dealing with. And then it gets the cohort contacts and transforms to get the contact IDs, get contacts, and returns those contacts. So in terms of what inputs we have over here, I can just quickly show you by debugging this. It's asking for cohort ID variable. This is not a required input. It's actually optional. I could use this flow also with cohort start date and course ID variable. And the other ones are also optional as well, because, if I provide the cohort ID, then I can skip the rest. In terms of output, what we are sending back is actually a contact collection, right? Contact collection record variable. Now remember, when you're passing a collection record variable, you can pass all the information about that contact or explicitly tell which fields need to be passed back, and that you do in your get contacts. Here I have specified that I want my flow to only get first name, last name, and email. That's why even if my Agentforce agent decides to show contact cards to the user, it's only going to know first name, last name, and email. I don't really want to pass any other personal details to Agentforce. Let's quickly look at the other flows here. The other one is enroll cohort participant. So this one is going to get cohort and then find the cohort that we're talking about and check the cohort contact, see whether it exists. Now, because I cannot delete records, I have multiple scenarios. It could be that there's a cohort contact record that exists in either active or inactive state, or it may not exist. Then in that case, this flow would have to create a record. If it's in inactive state, that record would have to change back to active state for that contact to be enrolled in the course. And here my input variables are cohort start date variable, contact ID variable, course ID variable. So this one actually receives the course ID and cohort start date variable to enroll the contact in it. It doesn't really receive the cohort ID variable. That would be actually another approach that I could have taken. It depends on how you want to do this. Now, I've seen examples in scenarios where people who built agents are actually receiving text and string inputs into Flow and trying to resolve those inside Flow. Like, for example, the cohort name or the course name or the person's full name, and they would try to parse and process that data inside Flow. I think what needs to be done here is we have our LLM to process all the strings, and we will have LLM to query the records or identify them by name, and then we would probably want to always pass a record ID into our flow to make sure that we get accurate and predictable results. Again, for my remove cohort participant auto launch flow, I have again a very similar flow, but in this case I know that there is a cohort contact record, and I would actually update that cohort contact record in active. The first version of this flow had a delete records element, and that obviously didn't work. Agentforce refused to process that, which is actually good news. Agentforce shouldn't delete any records at this point. There's one more thing I wanted to show you. For my fault paths, I tied them to assignment elements where I would actually assign a Boolean value to any success variable that I would pass back to Agentforce, just in case I want to process it later. And then for the result message variable, I would also pass a message that the user could see and understand in case of an error. Sorry, this contact could not be removed from the course cohort. I could choose to display that message directly to the user, or just simply in my instructions for the topic, say like if there's a fault, go ahead and display this message to the user. It could go either way. And also for my success, I did something similar where I assigned true to is success boolean that I would pass back, and the result message variable that would say success, the contact has been removed from this cohort. So in a nutshell, this is my first Agentforce setup. And as you can see, it's not perfect yet. I'm still working on it. How did you set up yours? Did you have any learnings in the process? Go ahead and share those with me. And as you reviewed my setup, did you come up with questions, or did you see anything that was strange for you that you couldn't understand? Go ahead and give those to me in the comments, and I will respond to all of them. And I started writing blog posts on the topic as well. Check salesforce.com and you are going to see other details about my setup and my considerations that I went through when I was setting up my first agent. Have a great day.